In a stunning escalation of economic warfare, President Donald Trump issued a new threat targeting the brick-and-mortar nations of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, proposing a staggering 150% tariff on their exports. Trump's warning was stark that any country that dared to discuss an alternative to the US dollar would face crippling tariffs. This aggressive step, according to Trump, emerged because BRIC was actively trying to dismantle the dominance of the United States dollar in the global market by building an independent financial system. This system has the potential to reduce American control and create a new world order free from American influence. But there is a fundamental question to consider if BRICS are truly unimportant. Why does the United States feel the need to issue such extreme threats? If the US dollar is so invincible, why is it willing to engage in high economic warfare against countries that pose no threat? Okay, before continuing to watch the video, please like, share, subscribe, activate the bell so that you don't miss out on global issues that occur. Thank you. The real worrying fact is that America seems to be panicking. For over a century, the US dollar has been the undisputed global reserve currency, strengthening America's power over world trade and finance. This dominance forces countries around the world to store US dollars, settle international transactions in US dollars, and rely on American-controlled financial systems such as SWIFT. With this immense power, the United States is able to manipulate global markets, printing money without consequence and imposing crushing sanctions on countries that dare to defy its wishes. But now the BRICS countries are challenging this long-standing order. Trump's extreme response shows how much of a threat they perceive the BRICS to be. This is not just a trade issue, it is about a major shift in global power dynamics that Washington is desperate to prevent. The core of US dominance lies in the dollar system. In the 1970s, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia to ensure that all global oil transactions were conducted in dollars. This agreement forces every oil-importing country to hold significant USD reserves, artificially increasing the value of the dollar and ensuring that global demand for the currency remains high. Against this backdrop, the steps taken by Trump and the reaction of the BRICS countries will largely determine the future direction of the global economy. Now that the BRICS are actively challenging the global financial system, dominated by the US dollar, the foundations of the petrodollar are starting to crack, with China and Russia having moved away from the dollar and using their own currencies. More than 90% of trade between the two countries is now conducted in yuan and rubles. India has also been buying oil from Russia using the rupee completely, eliminating the dollar from energy transactions, which is of greater concern to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Two of America's most loyal energy allies are openly considering accepting the yuan in oil sales. This signals that even as Washington's historical partners are beginning to explore alternatives to the dollar, this shift is not just theory, it is happening. The International Monetary Fund has now confirmed that the US dollar's dominance on the world stage is eroding. In 2000, the US dollar accounted for over 70% of global reserves, but by 2023, that figure had fallen to just 58%. And the decline is continuing as more countries look for alternatives to the dollar. In addition, China's digital currency has been tested for use in international oil trading, suggesting that the days of the US dollar's monopoly over global transactions may be numbered. This marks a monumental shift in the global financial landscape that Washington is struggling to contain. If the BRICS succeed in launching an alternative global reserve currency, the consequences for the United States would be enormous. Washington would lose its most powerful geopolitical tool, the ability to control global finance through dollar dominance. Without the dollar's central role in international trade, the United States would no longer be able to impose sanctions, control capital flows, or manipulate markets as it has done for decades. It's not just about trade policy, it's about the United States struggling to maintain its grip on a world that is increasingly slipping out of its control. Trump is well aware of the high stakes. If the BRICS continue their strategy of global interests, the US dollar will continue to erode, potentially causing an economic crisis in Washington. The American economy is built on debt, backed by global demand for dollars. If the BRICS and other countries start trading in their own currencies, the demand for dollars will disappear, resulting in high inflation in the United States and further weakening America's economic clout on the global stage. This is why Trump is so opposed to the BRICS' financial ambitions. The rise of the BRICS is not just about creating an alternative currency, but about laying the foundation for a world where the United States is no longer the arbiter. But the question is, will Trump's economic threats stop the BRICS, or will they backfire? Trump has portrayed himself as a tough and unyielding leader, claiming that his economic threats have forced the BRICS to back down, but the reality is much more complicated. Trump's proposed 150% tariffs have accelerated the move away from us. Economic dominance. With the 2023 BRICS summit rapidly expanding to welcome 5 new countries, Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, marking one of the biggest geopolitical shifts in decades as more countries turn to the BRICS as a counterweight to the US-led financial order. The expansion of the BRICS is far from over. Countries such as Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, and Thailand are in active discussions to join the group, further strengthening the influence of the BRICS. Trump's weapon of choice tariffs has proven ineffective in the past. In 2018, he imposed tariffs on China in the hope of forcing Beijing to change its trade policies instead. China retaliated by slashing agricultural imports from the United States, devastating American farmers. With his latest threat of 150% tariffs on the BRICS countries, Trump is repeating the same strategy, but this time the consequences for the U.S. economy will be far more severe. The U.S. is heavily dependent on imports from the BRICS countries such as electronics, metals, rare earths, pharmaceuticals, and agricultural products. If these goods are subject to crippling tariffs on companies, the U.S. will have no choice but to raise prices, which will lead to higher inflation and further weaken the U.S. economy. With all these factors, it is clear that the situation the U.S. is currently facing is complex and challenging. Meanwhile, the BRICS countries have many alternatives to strengthen their position. China can shift its exports to Africa and Latin America, while Russia has increased its energy trade with India and countries in the Middle East. Brazil and South Africa, as major exporters of food and natural resources, are also expanding their trade relations with China and Europe. In comparison, the United States is increasingly isolated with every step it takes. Trump's tariff strategy is doomed to fail. Instead of weakening the BRICS, these tariffs have actually encouraged the group to accelerate their economic independence plans. Every time Washington attacks the BRICS economically, the bloc finds new ways to reduce its dependence on the United States, leaving Washington increasingly powerless in a divided world. Trump's aggressive tariff policy has not only failed to weaken the BRICS, but has also isolated the United States from the rest of the world with the strengthening of economic ties between the BRICS countries. The United States is losing influence even among its closest allies. For example, the European Union, Canada, and Europe has prompted these countries to seek alternatives to the U.S.-dominated financial system. The European Union is increasingly concerned about U.S. sanctions, and many countries are actively exploring the use of alternative currencies such as the yuan and the euro in international trade settlements. European countries are growing tired of relying on the Washington-controlled financial system and are prioritizing partnerships outside the U.S. influence. China and Russia are also continuing to expand their bilateral trade, reaching a record $240 billion in 2023. The United States is now in a tricky position. History has shown that the United States has failed to isolate Russia with sanctions, while India is deepening its energy ties with Moscow away from the U.S.-dominated oil market. Even countries in Africa that were previously considered allies of the West are strengthening their economic ties with China. Trade between Africa and China reached $282 billion in 2023. In this context, the world is changing. The United States is no longer the main decision maker but is maintaining an increasingly fragile economic order. Washington is increasingly isolated on the global stage. While the BRICS thrive in the vacuum created by U.S. policies, this signals an inevitable shift towards a multipolar world. What comes next for the BRICS? The bloc is no longer simply reacting to U.S. economic threats. They are actively building a financial system that could reshape global trade and finance. One of the most significant developments being Russia's proposal for a gold BRICS currency that could rival the US dollar in international trade. Currencies, backed by real commodities such as gold and natural resources, offer stability and protection against inflation and are a safe alternative to fiat currencies controlled by central banks. China is also leading the way in digital finance, with its digital currency that has been tested for international oil transactions. This proves that the US dollar is no longer the only viable option for global trade. As more countries adopt China's digital currency, the US dollar's dominance is being eroded. The petrodollar system that has made the US dollar the global center of oil trade for decades is now on the brink of collapse. If major oil producers such as Saudi Arabia and Russia start accepting payments in yuan instead of dollars, this could signal the end of US economic hegemony. The implications of all this are startling and suggest that the United States may be caught in a desperate gamble as to whether Trump's tariffs will work. One thing is clear, the 150% tariffs will not deter the BRICS from pursuing their financial independence. Instead, they may only strengthen the bloc's resolve to break away from the US-led economic order. As the BRICS expand their financial networks, more and more countries will join the movement to create a multipolar world, where power is shared among many, rather than concentrated in Washington. The United States appears to be running out of ways to stop this shift. Trump's tariff threats are not a sign of strength, but a desperate last-ditch effort to preserve a dying economic system. America no longer controls the global economy, and the BRICS show that countries can thrive without relying on the dollar. The era of U.S. economic dominance seems to be coming to an end, and the future will most likely belong to a world led by BRICS. Finally, a thought-provoking question arises. How long can the U.S. delay the inevitable? Do you believe Trump's tariffs can stop BRICS? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications on this video to stay informed about the latest developments in global economic geopolitics and the ongoing changes in the world order. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.